Alright, gang. Buckle up, because this one's a whole roller coaster. A rapper stands in front of what he swears is a $100 million mansion, brags on camera like it's his personal kingdom, and within hours his oldest rival online has already flipped the entire flex upside down with 4 little letters. Airbnb. And no, that's not a typo. Rick Ross showed the internet a palace. 50 Cent looked at the same palace, laughed in that villain in a cartoon way he does, and told the world Ross basically borrowed the whole vibe by the night. And once that seed hit the timeline, it didn't just grow, it exploded. Because this isn't some random back and forth between 2 random rappers. This is Rozay versus Fif. This is the longest running grudge match hip-hop has, and it just picked up a brand new weapon, the short-term rental listing. So if you thought this beef was quiet, think again. Rick Ross opened a door he probably shouldn't have opened. 50 Cent walked in wearing sneakers made of gasoline, and by the end of this breakdown you're going to see why the mansion is only the surface. Underneath it is a war about ownership, credibility, wealth, image, receipts, and one shockingly unexpected business offer that nobody on planet Earth saw coming. Stay locked in, because the wild part isn't the Airbnb line. The wild part is what Ross said after it. Let me set the scene. Rick Ross had just dropped his new album, Set in Stone. And for a man who has spent 2 decades marketing himself as the boss of bosses, the numbers coming back weren't exactly bulletproof. Word going around the industry is that the album debuted at number 39 on the Billboard 200, with a first-week haul reported at around 19,000 copies. Now, for anybody who's not deep in chart math, that's the kind of number that lights up group chats and podcast panels and gets people whispering the word flop like it's contagious. And when you're Rick Ross, the moment somebody smells weakness, 20 microphones show up trying to poke the wound. Enter 50 Cent, because of course he showed up. Fif has been circling Rozay's career like a hawk since the mid-2000s. Every dip in the ratings, every rumor, every awkward camera angle, 50 clocks it, remixes it, and posts it before Ross has even had his morning glory. And this time, 50 wasn't just clowning the sales. He wasn't just laughing at the streams. He was about to go after something bigger. Something Ross treats as a shield, an identity, a personality trait, and a business card all in one. The lifestyle itself. The house. The palm trees. The estate. The whole you can't even show me a palm tree in your front yard energy. And that's where the video everybody's been passing around comes in. Because here's what Ross actually said before 50 dropped the joke that broke the internet. Ross was defending Set in Stone by trying to reframe the entire scoreboard. His argument was pretty pointed. He basically said, look, if I wanted to chase a big flashy first week number, I could have done it. That's cheap. That game is easy. But that's not what real wealth looks like. Rozay went on to argue that anybody obsessing over first week sales is missing the bigger picture. He pointed to businesses. He pointed to investments. He pointed to properties. He pointed to the long-term game he's supposedly been building since Trilla, Deeper Than Rap, Teflon Don, and every album cycle since. And then, right there on camera, he panned the shot toward his mansion and dropped the line that would set the whole internet on fire. He said, and I quote, "This a $100 million house." That was the moment. That was the pin coming out of the grenade. Because whether Rozay meant that literally, whether he meant it as a rough estimate, whether he meant it as bravado, or whether he meant it as pure marketing, the second that number left his mouth, it became a claim on the internet. And on the internet, every claim is a challenge. And every challenge, when 50 Cent is watching, becomes ammunition. 50 Cent didn't need a lawyer, a receipt, or a podcast slot to respond. He just needed Instagram. Fif hopped online and told his followers, in that classic 50 tone, that Rozay was standing inside an open house pretending it was his personal estate, and that the property was actually listed on Airbnb. That was it. That was the whole shot. No essay. No screenshot war. No 4-minute rant. Just one clean, brutal, mocking accusation lobbed like a paper airplane straight into Ross's mansion tour. Now, real quick before anybody runs with this, Ross has not publicly confirmed a single word of the Airbnb claim. Airbnb, according to the reporting that's out right now, hasn't stepped forward to confirm or deny it either. So the technically correct version of this story is not 50 proved Rozay's crib is a rental. The technically correct version is that 50 Cent accused Ross of showcasing a property as his own while alleging it was available for booking. But we all know how the internet works. Once Fifth says something with that much confidence, most of the timeline treats it like it's carved in stone. And Rozay, whether he liked it or not, had officially walked into 50's trap. Now think about the strategy here for a second, because 50 Cent didn't just fire a random insult. Fifth attacked the exact same thing Ross was using as a shield. Ross said, "Don't judge me by streaming numbers, look at what I own." 50 said, "Okay, and what if what you're showing me isn't even yours?" That's the whole game. That's why the shot landed. This wasn't a diss track. This was a credibility grenade. And it landed because the target was already leaning against it. If Rozay had never opened the door with the mansion flex, Fifth never gets the chance to swing at it. But Ross did open the door, wide open, with music playing and a camera rolling, and Fifth walked through it laughing. Now hold that thought, because it flips again. Rewind with me for a second, because to understand why this exchange landed so hard, you need to understand what Rick Ross and 50 Cent have actually been doing to each other since 2009. This isn't a new feud. This isn't a manufactured beef for streaming clicks. This is one of the oldest, coldest, longest-running rivalries in modern hip-hop. Ross and Fifth have spent more than a decade doing the exact same thing to each other on a rotating schedule. Each of them looks at what the other person considers his biggest strength, and each of them tries to turn that same strength into a weakness. Ross has a mansion? 50 says the mansion is a rental. 50 has a hit series? Ross questions whether he even owns it. Ross drops an album? 50 mocks the sales. 50 talks about business? Ross clowns his relationship history. It never actually stops. It just changes clothes. And every time either one of them thinks the feud is going quiet, one of them wakes up, checks the timeline, and drops a new bomb. This is what makes the Airbnb line so effective. It's not just a random insult. It's the latest chapter in a book both of them have been co-authoring for over 15 years. And the pages keep filling themselves. For 50 Cent, the timing was almost too perfect. Fifth had already been eating breakfast, lunch and dinner off the set in stone numbers before the mansion clip even hit. He was going up under every album post, every promo shot, every interview clip and reminding people that 39 was a real number and it wasn't a good one. He said the project was trash. He told Ross to hop out of the conversation entirely. He essentially declared open season on Rozay's rollout. So when the mansion clip landed on the timeline with Ross's own voice narrating a $100 million valuation, 50 had a runway wider than any airport. Because remember, Ross wasn't just showing a house. Ross was building an argument. And the argument was, look at my life, not my streams. 50 took that argument, turned it inside out, and asked one simple question, is that life even yours? That's when Ross flipped the whole thing sideways. Because Ross doesn't fight back in insults alone. Rozay fights back in flexes. And the moment 50 questioned the authenticity of his house, Ross went on the PBD podcast with Patrick Bet-David and answered with something even more ridiculous. He said, and try to picture this, that he'd let 50 Cent wash the bottom of his yacht. Not just the deck. The bottom. Underwater. With goggles, a mouthpiece, and fins strapped on like a cartoon character. Ross joked that 50 could get down there like a dolphin and give the yacht a proper scrub. He even name-checked Flipper. Now, on the surface, it sounds like a punchline. And it is. It's silly. It's cartoonish. It's over the top. But listen to what's actually happening underneath the joke. Ross isn't just saying, I have a yacht. He's saying, I have so much wealth that a rapper on 50 Cent's level could theoretically be reduced to hired help. That's the flex hidden inside the joke. That's the shot inside the humor. It's a status move dressed up as comedy. It's classic Rozay, he'll smile the whole time he's swinging. But Ross didn't stop at the yacht joke. He pushed further, and this is where things got really interesting. Rozay took the same argument he'd been making about album sales and pointed it directly at 50 Cent's biggest empire builder. Ross claimed that 50 doesn't actually own power. And he didn't stop there. He also claimed that 50 doesn't fully own certain pieces of his broader entertainment legacy, including the album Get Rich or Die Tryin', which, according to Ross, is why 50 supposedly doesn't market that album the way most rappers would market their own signature project. Now, and this is important, because it changes the shape of the story, those ownership claims came from Rick Ross. They should be presented as Rozay's version of the story, not as verified corporate reality. But even the rhetorical move is fascinating. Because notice what Ross is doing. He's flipping the entire scoreboard. He's saying, you don't win by having successful projects. You win by owning them. That's the same argument Rozay's been making about music sales the whole time. Don't count the streams, count the assets. Don't count the debuts, count the deeds. And once you follow that logic, you realize Ross wasn't just clapping back at 50 for the Airbnb line. Rozay was rewriting the rules of the fight in real time. The wild part? Right here. Because right around the time everybody thought the yacht joke was the big finish, Ross showed up on Joe and Jada, that's Joe Budden and Jada Kiss, if you're new, and casually raised the stakes even higher. Rozay pulled up wearing a piece of jewelry so massive he referred to it as his $1 million finger. And then, in the middle of a completely different conversation about rappers who talk too much trash, Ross floated the idea, a joke, obviously, but still, that if he ever got the opportunity, he'd love to slap 50 Cent with that same ring. Everybody in the room laughed. Rozay kept a straight face for 2 seconds, then laughed too. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a plan. It was cinema. But cinema always plays well online. Because the visual was too vivid to resist, Ross, $1 million hand, imaginary slap, 50 Cent's face on the receiving end. Screenshots everywhere. Clips everywhere. Fifth's mentions? On fire. And the wildest part is that Rozay was doing all of this while also handling another feud on a completely different front. Because Ross wasn't just answering 50 Cent, Rozay was also trading punches with Drake. Drake had reportedly clipped Ross on his new album Iceman, and Ross fired right back, calling Drake washed and dragging what he described as a string of underwhelming projects. So think about that lineup for a second. In the same month, Rick Ross is defending Set in Stone, clowning 50 Cent's mansion joke, teasing a slap with $1 million ring, calling Drake washed, and joking about turning Fifth into an underwater window washer for a yacht. That's not a rapper. That's a WWE storyline. Rozay isn't just fighting one man, he's running a whole promotional tour on his back. And every time somebody swings, he doesn't dodge. He counters. And he counters loud enough that the counter itself becomes the news cycle. Now here's where the entire tone of this story flips into something almost nobody expected. Because after all the shots, the jokes, the yacht images, the $1 million rings, the album drama, and the Airbnb accusation, Rick Ross said something that made every hip-hop journalist in the country do a double take. Ross was hopping on Instagram Live, catching up with fans, and somebody in the chat asked him a question that on paper should have gotten a one-word answer. The question was simple: would you ever do business with 50 Cent? And the easy answer, based on 15 years of insults, would have been absolutely not. That's the answer everybody was expecting. That's the answer that would have kept the feud alive without any interruption. But that's not what Ross said. Rozay pivoted. Ross went a completely different direction. He didn't scream. He didn't laugh. He didn't clown. He got weirdly reasonable. And what he said next is arguably the most important line in this entire saga. Ross admitted that he was aware of 50's studio ambitions. Specifically, Fifth has been pushing a plan to build a movie studio operation in Shreveport, Louisiana. According to Ross, he's actually seen the renderings, the drawings, the layouts, the concept art. He said 50 had discussed the vision with somebody close to him, which means Rozay isn't hearing about it for the first time. He knows Fifth has been raising money around the project. He knows there are investors circling. He knows the numbers being tossed around. And when the fan asked whether he'd ever consider getting involved, Ross said, and pay attention to the exact phrasing, because it matters, men of business don't discuss the past. It's new money, I'll consider it. That right there is one of the wildest sentences in modern rap beef history. Because think about who's saying it. This is the same Rick Ross who 30 minutes earlier was joking about drowning 50 Cent under a yacht. And now Rozay's saying he'd sit at the same table with him if there's real money on it. That's not a truce. That's not a peace treaty. That's not even a friendship. That's just capitalism doing what capitalism always does. And Rozay knew exactly what he was doing when he said it. Because the moment Ross planted that phrase, men of business don't discuss the past, the entire dynamic of the feud transformed. This wasn't Rozay backing down. This was Rozay reframing himself as the adult in the room. Ross basically told his audience, I can trade shots all day, but if there's a bag involved, I'm still built like a boss. That's the Rozay brand in one sentence. And whether or not the actual business deal ever happens, the framing was already a win. Because now everybody in the conversation is asking, what would 50 Cent even say to that? What if Fif actually shows up with a pitch? What if the two of them sit in a room with a lawyer, a napkin, and a real number? Suddenly the story stops being about who won the mansion argument. Suddenly it's about whether two of the biggest personalities in hip-hop could actually pull off the wildest business alliance the culture has ever seen. And Ross didn't leave it at one livestream. Rozay went back on his Instagram story and doubled the pressure. He called the opportunity once in a lifetime. He tagged Fif directly. He wrote that he could, quote, change boy life. Now stop and picture that. Rick Ross, live on Instagram, telling 50 Cent that he, Rozay, has the resources to change 50 Cent's life. Fif, the same man who has spent 15 years telling everybody in the industry that he's the most powerful independent businessman in hip-hop. That same 50 Cent is now being told by his oldest enemy that he needs to come sit at Ross's table for the deal of a lifetime. That's not a business offer. That's a diss track in a business suit. That's a chess move so slick it doubles as a body shot. Because whether Fif accepts, declines, ignores, or claps back, Ross wins on optics. If 50 says yes, Ross looks like the elder statesman with the checkbook. If 50 says no, Ross looks like the one who tried to bridge the divide. And if 50 says nothing, Ross gets to say, see, I offered, he didn't answer. Every road leads back to Rozay looking like he flipped the whole feud on its head. And this is why Rick Ross has survived every rap beef aimed at him for 2 straight decades. Because Rozay never plays the same song twice. Now, and this is important, 50 Cent hadn't publicly responded to the business offer at the time the story was reported. And that silence is loud. Because Fif never stays quiet for long. Anybody who's followed 50 Cent's Instagram for the past 10 years knows that man treats his comment section like a broadcast tower. Every insult gets a laughing emoji. Every headline gets a repost. Every rival gets a nickname. So when 50 doesn't post something? That means one of two things. Either he's cooking up a response so sharp he's polishing it. Or he's genuinely surprised by the pivot. And either scenario is fascinating. Because if 50 comes back swinging, this feud is right back where it started, jokes, receipts, insults. But if Fif actually engages the business idea, we're looking at the beginning of one of the most unexpected pivots in modern hip-hop history. Which brings us to the real question underneath the entire story. And this is the question I want you to sit with. Is Rick Ross actually offering business? Or is Rozay just trolling on a different frequency? Because if you look at the wording carefully, I could change boy life, that's not the language of a partner. That's the language of a benefactor. That's the language of somebody positioning himself above the other person, financially and psychologically. Ross isn't saying, let's build together. Rozay's saying, come get help. And that, my friends, is the ultimate flex disguised as generosity. It's the same energy as offering to let 50 wash a yacht. It's the same energy as saying, I could sell 250,000 units if I wanted, but that's beneath me. It's the same energy as, look at my palm trees, look at my estate, look at my $100 million valuation. Because Rick Ross doesn't argue. Ross rebrands. And every time somebody tries to shrink him, Rozay stretches even bigger. So let's rewind and look at the entire chessboard together, because this is not just about a house. This is about how two of the most media-savvy figures in hip-hop history keep weaponizing wealth against each other in real time. Rick Ross opens the door with the mansion flex. 50 Cent responds with the Airbnb line. Ross counters with the yacht image. 50 hits back on socials. Ross widens the fight by attacking ownership. Rozay pushes further with the $1 million finger. 50 leans into the album flop narrative. Ross pivots to Drake. Then Rozay comes back, drops the business offer, and reframes himself as a possible investor for the man he was insulting hours earlier. That's not chaos. That's choreography. And it's the reason both men still have a chokehold on hip-hop headlines. They know how to keep the story alive without ever really resolving it. They know how to give the internet exactly enough to argue about without giving anybody a final answer. Now, is Rick Ross's mansion actually $100 million? Maybe. Maybe not. It could be. It could easily be less. It could be worth more than the Zillow estimate and less than the flex. What we do know, from public reporting over the years, is that Rozay has openly discussed his property portfolio in interviews before, talking about acquisitions, valuations, renovations, and the fact that real estate is one of the categories he's built a lot of long-term equity in. Roz has said publicly that he purchased a major estate for around $35 million and invested another chunk on top of that to bring the total up above $90 million. That's Rozay's version of the timeline. That's Roz's telling. Doesn't mean the market agrees with him. Doesn't mean an appraiser would sign off. Doesn't mean the property he was standing inside in that clip is the same property he was describing. But it does mean that when Roz says $100 million house, he's not necessarily pulling that number out of thin air. He's stitching it into a bigger self-narrative he's been building for a decade. And when 50 Cent shows up with an Airbnb accusation, Fifth isn't just attacking a building. He's attacking a whole personal mythology. And the Airbnb question, even with no confirmation, is actually more interesting than a lot of people realize. Because let's say for a second, hypothetically, the property really was listed. Would that actually prove that Rick Ross doesn't own it? No, not automatically. Wealthy people list expensive homes for short-term rental all the time. Estate rentals are a booming business. Some of the most exclusive properties in America, from Malibu to Miami to Aspen, quietly rotate through short-term rental platforms while remaining fully privately owned. So even if 50 Cent's claim turned out to be technically accurate, that the property in question had a listing somewhere, the actual conclusion isn't as clean as the joke made it sound. It could just as easily be a private owner making money off a real asset. And that's what makes Fifth's punchline so effective and so slippery at the same time. It's designed to hit hard, land loud, and travel far, but it doesn't have to be technically airtight to succeed. On the internet, a good line beats a good source every single time. Which pushes us right back to what this feud is really about. And it's not real estate. It's not albums. It's not Airbnb. It's identity. Rick Ross has spent 20 years selling the audience an image of a boss. Not just a rapper, a boss. Estates, cigars, yachts, Wingstop, MMG, cars, fur coats, empire. Every visual is designed to convince you that Rozay operates on a level above the standard rap tier. And 50 Cent has spent 20 years doing something almost identical but from a different angle. Fifth has sold you the image of an untouchable operator. Vitamin water, power, get rich or die tryin', G-Unit, television empire, film ambitions, boxing, digital media. Two men who both anchor their identities to wealth. Two men who both use money as the punchline and the point at the same time. So when they attack each other, they aren't really attacking each other's music. They're attacking each other's brand equity. That's why every clip becomes a headline. That's why every joke lands. Because both men understand that in 2026, the real fight isn't for chart position, it's for narrative supremacy. And narrative supremacy in hip-hop is worth more than any album debut. And let's be honest about something else. This whole cycle, mansion, Airbnb, yacht, $1 million ring, ownership claims, Drake side beef, potential business meeting, this whole thing is exactly the kind of drama that hip-hop's algorithm eats for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Every clip gets remixed. Every quote gets reposted. Every insult gets a reaction video. And both Rozay and Fifth have known how to feed this ecosystem better than anybody else in their generation. That's why nobody in the culture actually wants the feud to end. Because when Ross and 50 stop trading jabs, hip-hop loses one of its most reliable content engines. It would be like the NBA losing overtime. It would be like the NFL losing rivalry week. This isn't just a feud. This is a franchise. And the franchise just added a new chapter. Now hold on, because there's one more thread I need to pull, and it's the one people are sleeping on. Because sitting right in the middle of all this drama is a subtle but massive shift in Ross's public strategy. Rozay's tone has changed. If you go back and watch old Rick Ross vs 50 Cent moments from earlier in the feud, the mid-2000s, the early 2010s, Ross was more openly hostile. Diss tracks, uncomfortable stage moments, direct name drops in songs. But if you watch Ross now, in this current chapter, Rozay is doing something completely different. He's laughing more. He's joking more. He's flexing more. He's inviting 50 to weird hypothetical situations, wash my yacht, sit at my business table, take my once-in-a-lifetime offer, pitch me your studio. That's a totally different energy. That's a man who's realized that the best way to win a public feud in the streaming era isn't to be angry. It's to be entertaining. And Ross has quietly become one of the most entertaining people in hip-hop again by pretending he's not trying. He's winning by making the whole thing look fun. 50 Cent has been operating from a different angle. Fif is still doing what Fif has always done: jab, mock, repost, screenshot, laugh, walk away, come back tomorrow. That routine has worked for him for 15 years and there's zero reason to fix what isn't broken. But now, 50 is facing a slightly awkward version of the same routine. Because if he responds to the business offer with a joke, Rozay looks like the mature one. If Fif ignores it, Rozay looks like the one who tried. If 50 responds seriously, then we're suddenly living in a timeline where these two men are actually negotiating. And any way you slice it, Ross has managed to put 50 in a position where every reply gives Rozay some kind of narrative advantage. That's not luck. That's strategy. That's Rick Ross treating hip-hop like chess in a fur coat. And by the way, before anybody thinks the beef has magically simmered, remember that this same story arc also included Rozay trolling 50 over the Travis Scott and Cuban Link situation, according to the reporting circulating around this feud. So even while Ross was offering business handshakes, he was still throwing personal jabs. That's the balancing act. That's the Rozay tightrope. Offer money with one hand, throw shade with the other. Compliment in one sentence, clown in the next. It's exhausting to keep up with, but that's exactly why the internet stays locked in. Because every 24 hours, one of these two men wakes up and gives the timeline something new to argue about. And every 24 hours, it's a slightly different flavor. So where does the story actually leave us right now? Nobody knows. And that's the point. That's the entire genius of it. The Airbnb accusation hasn't been confirmed. The mansion valuation hasn't been officially audited. The business offer hasn't been formally answered. The yacht joke hasn't been legally scheduled. The $1 million ring slap hasn't happened. The Drake side beef is still cooking. And Ross has managed to keep every single one of those threads dangling in front of the culture at the same time, like a man juggling knives on live TV. And every knife is spinning. And nobody wants to look away, because the second you look away, one of them lands, and then you have to scroll back to figure out how it happened. Real talk though, this is why Rick Ross has stayed relevant this long. Rozay didn't survive by being the loudest voice in the room. Ross survived by being the smartest one in the room. Every time somebody tries to shrink Rozay, he expands. Every time somebody tries to embarrass him, he flexes. Every time somebody questions his wealth, he doubles down and makes bigger claims. And every time somebody expects him to fight, he pivots to business instead. And every time somebody expects him to negotiate, he lands a joke that sounds like a punch. Rick Ross has turned unpredictability itself into a brand. And in an industry that used to reward consistency, Ross is winning by refusing to give you the same version of himself twice. 50 Cent, meanwhile, is still the master of the one-line kill. Fif knows how to weaponize simplicity. He doesn't need paragraphs. He doesn't need diss tracks. He doesn't need a full album. He needs 6 words and a captioned photo. And 50 has proven, again and again, that the internet still respects a man who can shrink his enemy down to a single meme. The Airbnb line worked because it's short. It's memorable. It's shareable. It's cruel in a friendly voice. It's the perfect 50 Cent formula, the joke that keeps working long after you scroll past it. So even though Rozay outmaneuvered him on the business front, Fif still walked away from this round with the sharpest one-liner. And that's why the feud can never actually be over. Because both men keep winning different rounds. Both men keep hitting different weaknesses. Both men keep giving each other new material. Now, let's step out of the ring for a second and look at what this feud says about hip-hop in 2026. Because underneath the Ross vs 50 saga is a much bigger cultural question. What actually counts as success anymore? Is success one strong album week? Is it a real estate portfolio? Is it ownership of your masters? Is it building a movie studio in Louisiana? Is it a yacht? Is it a mansion? Is it a hit TV show? Is it your personal net worth in Google? Or is it something less measurable: respect, longevity, cultural weight, storytelling power? Because Rozay and Fif have essentially been arguing about that exact question in public for over a decade, and they still can't agree. And the truth is that the culture can't agree either. That's why the beef never gets resolved. Because neither of them is really wrong. Streaming numbers matter. But so does ownership. Assets matter. But so do cultural moments. Real estate matters. But so does controlling your masters. What Rick Ross and 50 Cent are actually staging in front of the world isn't just a feud. It's an open-air seminar about the modern definition of wealth. And every diss is basically a footnote in that argument. Which is why this whole story is far bigger than a mansion. Because when Ross said this a $100 million house, he wasn't just flexing on Fifth. Rozay was reinforcing the entire thesis he's been selling for 20 years. And when 50 Cent responded with the Airbnb accusation, Fifth wasn't just clowning a house. He was trying to shrink an entire brand. That's the level these two operate on. That's the level almost nobody else in hip-hop is even trying to operate on. This isn't Twitter fingers. This isn't subtweeting. This is a full-scale media war between two men who have both mastered the art of using their own bank accounts as microphones. And every time one of them talks, the other one already has the next headline loaded. So here's the wrap-up nobody wants to hear, but everybody needs to accept. This beef is not ending. It's not slowing down. It's not fizzling out. Not this week. Not next month. Not next album. Not next studio deal. Not next business offer. Because Rick Ross and 50 Cent have both figured out that keeping each other in the news is more valuable than any single win. They can't afford to end it, even if they wanted to. Rozay needs Fifth for content. Fifth needs Rozay for jokes. The rivalry is now a shared asset. It's a business partnership disguised as a war. And whether they ever actually sit at a table together in Shreveport, in Miami, in Atlanta, in New York, or anywhere else, the internet will still be watching every move like it's a live broadcast. Because that's the deal both men have accepted. As long as the world keeps clicking, the beef will keep breathing. Now, real quick before anybody runs with this, I want to say this one more time so nobody twists it. The Airbnb allegation came from 50 Cent. It hasn't been independently confirmed. Rozay hasn't publicly addressed the accusation, according to the reporting available right now. Airbnb hasn't chimed in. So when you're arguing with your cousin, your barber, or your group chat about this feud, don't say Fifth proved Ross's mansion is a rental. Fifth accused. Ross flexed. The internet did the rest. That's the accurate version. Everything else is theater. Very entertaining theater, obviously, but theater. And the same disclaimer applies to Ross's claims about 50 Cent not owning power or get rich or die tryin'. Those are Rozay's assertions. They should be treated as claims, not settled facts. Every big story has a version of the truth attached to each speaker. And in this story, both Rozay and Fifth are telling you exactly the version that makes them look bigger. That's how the game works. That's how it has always worked. So drop your take in the comments, I need to see where you land on this one. Do you think Rick Ross's mansion is really worth what Rozay says it is? Do you think 50 Cent's Airbnb accusation actually has legs, or was Fifth just cracking a joke that traveled faster than the truth? Do you think Ross is genuinely willing to sit down and cut a business deal with 50 over the Shreveport studio? Or do you think Rozay was trolling from the moment he said men of business don't discuss the past? Do you think Fifth will fire back, ignore it, or shock everybody by actually taking the meeting? I want to hear all of it, the receipts, the theories, the predictions, the wild guesses. Because if there's one thing history has taught us about these two, it's that the next chapter is already being written somewhere behind the scenes. And by the time this video hits your feed, one of them has probably already fired the next shot. Because that's the truth about Rick Ross and 50 Cent. They don't do endings. They do sequels. And this current chapter, the mansion, the Airbnb, the yacht joke, the ownership shots, the $1 million ring, the Instagram live business offer, the once-in-a-lifetime pitch, the Drake side beef, the set-in-stone defense, the Cuban link jabs, this whole chapter is just one more entry in a saga that started before half the current generation of hip-hop stars had even signed their first deal. And it's going to keep going. Rozay is going to keep flexing. Fifth is going to keep clowning. Somebody is going to bring up an album. Somebody is going to bring up a property. Somebody is going to bring up ownership. Somebody is going to laugh. Somebody is going to swing back. And the culture is going to keep watching, keep debating, keep laughing, keep arguing, keep clicking. Because that's the deal. That's the machine. That's a loop that just keeps looping. So the real question isn't whether Rick Ross won this round. The real question isn't whether 50 Cent's Airbnb line landed. The real question is what happens next. Does Fifth respond? Does Rozay double down? Does the business meeting actually take place? Does the Drake feud swallow the whole story? Does another mansion clip drop? Does another album diss drop? Does a lawyer get involved? Does a photo get leaked? Does an old footage get resurfaced? Does a receipt hit the timeline? Right now, everything is loaded and nothing has fired. That's the most dangerous point in any feud between these two, the moment right before somebody moves. So keep your notifications on and keep watching Rozay's Instagram, because the next twist isn't a question of if. It's a question of when. And when it lands, you're going to want to be locked in for the full reaction. Until the next chapter drops, stay tuned, stay tapped in, and I'll catch you on the next one.